Alrighty. Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today. It looks like we have one attendee so far. Go ahead and give people a couple minutes to join us.
Hello, everyone. This is Carlos. I'm on.
Good morning, Carlos.
Hi, Carlos.
Good morning.
Hey, brother.
Hello, hello.
Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. Give everybody just one more minute to join us today, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Alrighty. Looks like we've got about 6 people here, and I will go ahead and give it to Alex Andrade if you'd like to go ahead and get us started.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Andrade. I am the Director of Economic Development for the city of Milpitas, located here in Silicon Valley. I'd like to personally welcome you to the SBA Resources for Small Business webinar. Today marks the second webinar in our monthly series. Our webinars will be held on the last Thursday of every month from now through the end of the year. Today, we're going to hear from Chris Horton of the NorCal Small Business Development Center, Chris Gutierrez of the Small Business Administration, and Nicole Inamine of our Economic Development team will be sharing information about what it means to move into the orange tier in Santa Clara County. In honor of moving the orange tier, I'm actually wearing a partially orange shirt because we're clearly very excited about the fact that we're continually opening up our economy. So anyway, it's really important that we open up the economy, speaking of that, but we want to do it safely and productively. I want to also just mention that we're being joined by Anurag Paul of the Office of Assembly Member Alex Lee. Welcome, Anurag. Thank you for taking the time to join us. We're also welcomed today, or rather joined today, by Milpitas Chamber of Commerce President Warren Wettenstein. Welcome, Warren. Hope you're doing well. And yeah, with no further ado, let's just jump right into today's topics, which include the Paycheck Protection Program, as there's new information to share, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, and the ever important SBA Debt Relief. So we want to thank you for joining us, and let's make this a very engaging conversation. Don't be shy, ask questions. You have experts in front of you. So with that, I'm handing it over to Chris Horton.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. We're happy to be here to provide this valuable information to you. We'll jump right in here. So yeah, at the Northern California Small Business Development Center, we're supported by the SBA and the state of California. We provide free business consulting and advising, mentorship. We have some education information that we provide as well. We are part of the larger scale of the Northern California SBDC ecosystem, which is the Finance Center. We specialize in getting loans for small businesses. My name is Chris Horton. I'm one of the regional lending managers for NorCal SBDC. We have 20 lending specialists and finance advisors to be able to help folks. So if you're looking to sign up to get complimentary services, this is where you can go to get signed up for that. If you're looking to identify what your local SBDC center is, you can go to the NorCalSBDC.org website, and you can identify where your particular SBDC center is. So just some housekeeping and disclaimers. Just want to put this information out there. The slide deck will be shared during this webinar in the chat. The webinar is being recorded and will be available at ASKSBDC.com. If you have questions, please place them in the Q&A and not in the chat. Please wait until we go through each section, as we may answer your question during the presentation. Please let us know before your question if you are asking about the PPP, the EIDL, or any other program, specifically the SVOG, that Carlos will be able to answer questions for. If you need technical assistance, please request that in the chat. Things are changing all the time, so this is really critical to understand. The programs are evolving, finding ways to make these resources available to folks. So this information provided is relevant as of yesterday when I put it together. So just keep that in mind, that things are constantly evolving. So if you hear something today and in 3 to 5 days you hear something entirely different, then just realize that we know and are sharing with you that it's evolving, because I'm going to share something with you today that I know is going to change on April 6th. So the agenda today, we're going to cover the Paycheck Protection Program. We're going to talk about the EIDL, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the targeted EIDL Advance. We're going to talk briefly about SBA Debt Relief. We're going to talk about the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. We're going to make certain that you are aware of the SBA support that's available for you. Then we'll open it up for Q&A. I know that it's not on here, but Nicole's going to also be giving a local update as well. So be looking out for that. All right, let's see here. Move this up just a little bit. SBA PPP second draw changes as per Biden administration. What has happened is that increased financial aid to sole proprietors, contractors, as self-employed has changed in the formula. Just a real high level. Before these changes, we were using net profit for these sort of business entities on the Schedule C of a 1040 IRS form. And what's changed now is we're now using line 7 on the Schedule C of a 1040, which is your gross revenue. So you have a larger dollar amount that we can use to calculate your eligible loan amount. So making it more accessible for folks to qualify. The elimination exclusion for prior non-fraud felony convictions, eliminated restriction on student loan debt delinquencies, and now non-citizen U.S. business owners can use their I-10 numbers. Eligibility for PPP2, you can apply for a second draw PPP loan until March 31st, 2021. Carlos may be able to speak a little to this. I know there's been, they've been working to push this out. I know it's passed the House of Representatives, and I don't know that we have an official announcement, so we can't give an official announcement just yet, but Carlos later on may be able to speak to that if we are going to be able to extend this out. I know I've heard from some of the lenders that we work with that they are confident of that, but until it's official, we can't make it official ourselves. Make sure you include your SBA application number from the first draw on the second draw application. The maximum loan amount is $2 million. Company size for those for the PPP round 2 for a second draw is 300 employees or less. You must evidence a reduction in gross receipts between comparable calendar quarters. You don't have to do the entire year. You can look at Q1 of 2019, Q1 of 2020, and show that there's been a 25% minimum reduction. And as I said, you only need to do 1 quarter. Previously received a first draw PPP loan and will or has used the full amount. So basically they're not saying that you need to go through forgiveness, but you need to have exhausted all the funds from the first PPP round 1. Only for authorized use of funds, must have been in business as of February 15th of 2020. All lenders are open for applications. So if you've applied before with a lender, it's more efficient for you to go back to that lender because they have all the documentation from the first round, and there's a minimum requirement from you, a new application, the 25% reduction, and that's pretty much it. And then also for eligible PPP applicants, nonprofits can also apply for the PPP round 2. Yeah, if you're having challenges, if you're not really clear from the gate, we definitely encourage you to reach out to your local Chamber of Commerce. You can reach out to the SBDC centers. You can reach out to Alex and his team, and they can point you in the right direction as well. So we're here for you. There's no need for you to go about this on your own. So to give you a general overview of the terms for forgiveness. So PPP2 is spent on payroll costs and other eligible expenses. At least 60% of the proceeds are spent on payroll costs. Employee and compensation levels are maintained in the same manner as required for the first draw PPP loan. And for loans under $150,000, there's a simple application form for you, which is 3508S. The 60-40 split still applies for both new and second draw PPP loans, meaning again, 60% of the proceeds being primarily used or being solely used for payroll. The other 40% can be used on rent, utilities, and other operating expenses. The PPP2 draw limitations, the maximum second PPP loan amount is the lesser of 2.5 times the average monthly payroll, or 3.5 times the average monthly payroll cost and healthcare costs in the prior year when the loan was received, or within the calendar year for any business that is classified under this NAICS code of 72. So if your NAICS code is not 72, your calculation is going to be using 2.5 times your monthly payroll. But if your NAICS code is 72 for the industry classification, you're able to use 3.5 times your monthly payroll cost. Sounds more complicated with all those words. You just take a 12-month period, divide it by 12. That's your monthly average, multiplied by 2.5 or 3.5, depending on your NAICS code. The maximum loan amount that one entity can apply for or receive will be $2 million. Here are the allowable uses and eligible costs for payroll. So allowable use for the proceeds from the PPP, payroll costs, again, minimum 60% of the proceeds must be for payroll. Payment of interest on mortgage obligation, rent, utilities, and additional uses are on the next page. Eligible costs for payroll, salary, wage, commissions, or similar compensation, vacation, parental, family, medical, dismissal or separation, group health benefits, and that includes employer health insurance premiums, retirement benefits, state and local tax for payroll. So required documentation. So what you want to do is you want to make certain that we are recommending that keep all and any documents related to payroll and related costs, employee benefits, utilities, rent, and mortgage interest. Applications for the PPP can be found at the SBA.gov, and also you can get it directly from the financial institution that you apply for the PPP with, and then keep all related documents for a suggested 4 years. So here are the other, some other details that you should know about the two different programs. First, we're going to look at the PPP. The PPP is forgivable, and the EIDL is not forgivable. The interest rate for the PPP is 1%. So if for any reason the full amount isn't forgiven and it converts into a loan, it's going to be a 1% interest rate. On the EIDL, it's 3.75% interest for profit businesses, and for nonprofits, it's 2.75%. The term of the loan, the life of the loan on the PPP side is 2 to 5 years. It's a 30-year term loan on the EIDL. The use of the funds for PPP, again, payroll costs, mortgage interest, rent, and utilities. Use of funds for the EIDL is working capital, inventory, fixed debt payments, and normal business expenses. That's really important to make certain you can distinguish that the difference use of proceeds if you were to receive both. The main thing that you're looking to avoid is to do double dipping. It's where you're using PPP to pay payroll and you're also using EIDL during that same time to pay payroll. So the rule of thumb is use payroll protection program for payroll, use your EIDL for those other expenses. That keeps everything clean for you. The PPP, you apply for this through an SBA approved lender. The EIDL, you apply directly online with the SBA at SBA.gov. The PPP does not require any collateral. And then on the EIDL, for loans over $25,000, they'll be secured by a UCC filing. And there's a $100 deducted from the loan proceeds to pay for that UCC filing. So we'll talk about some additional CARES Act programs. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which we've covered some, the EIDL Appeal Program, the Targeted EIDL Advance, the SBA Debt Relief, Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, and Employee Retention Credit. I think some of these we may have taken off because we don't want to overload with too much information during this year. But again, this will be made available to you. And if there are questions about something, we have many folks that can answer those questions for you. So the EIDL program reopened in January. New funding as part of the second stimulus bill. Only one EIDL loan per EIN or Social Security number. With this, there was a link that can be shared for you to go to the SBA.gov to get the application. The application has been extended to December 31st of this year, so through the end of the year. And the turnaround time has been pretty decent because you don't have a large volume of folks applying as we did last March and April. This is the appeal process. So if you're looking to get reconsidered because there was a declination letter that you received for whatever reason, you have up to 6 months to get reconsidered on declined loans or loan increases. If you apply for EIDL and were denied, do not reapply because they're going to be able to identify the business entity, Social Security number, EIN number, and so forth. Go through the separate and dedicated appeal process. Here's the email address that you would be able to send an email to go through that appeal process. A second application will be flagged as a duplicate and slow the process down. Appeal process is working. There are folks that are going through the reconsideration process and they are being reconsidered. So that's something that's encouraging there. SBA's team will let you know what documents are needed when you're working through the appeal process, and the SBDC can also advise you on these documents. Targeted EIDL Advance. The SBA will reach out to those who may qualify via email with instructions to determine eligibility and submit documentation. So there's nothing that you can do yourselves to activate this, to start this process moving forward. Will balance out a previous EIDL. What that means is, they were doing, when it originally started, they would say that you can get up to a $10,000 advance. And they were doing $1,000 per employee. So if you had a business and it was just yourself and you received $1,000, what they're looking to balance out is that additional $9,000 to get you up to $10,000. Advance to the full $10,000 if the business is in a low-income community, suffered greater than 30% economic loss, and has 300 or fewer employees. Those who applied for an EIDL advance but didn't receive funds due to the lack of funding will receive a full $10,000 if they meet the same requirements above. Items needed to verify eligibility for the targeted EIDL advance: 2019 federal tax returns, an EIN or Social Security number, monthly gross receipts for 2019-2020, and completed months in 2021. Confirm information and original EIDL application is still accurate, and applicants that pass the initial eligibility requirements will be required to sign a 4506T, which is for tax transcripts, for the SBA to obtain transcripts before the agency can approve the targeted EIDL advance. So this is SBA Debt Relief. All borrowers with qualifying loans approved by SBA prior to March 27, 2020 will receive an additional 2 months of payments on principal and interest starting in February 2021. Underserved borrowers, namely the smallest and hardest hit, will receive an additional 3 months for a total of 5. Community Advantage loans and microloans approved by SBA prior to March 27, 2020 will receive 5 months of P&I payments. SBA payments of principal and interest on the first 3 months of newly approved loans will resume for all loans approved between February 1 and September 30th of 2020. This is also capped at a $9,000 per month, all subject to availability of funds. SBA Debt Relief, here are some enhancements. Waives borrower and lender fees. Some bank fees may still apply. Loan guarantee increases to 90% from 75%. The SBA Express loan is increased from 350 to 100 to 1 million. 504 Express loan program for real estate loans under 500,000, and micro loan program expanded to provide financial and technical assistance to businesses impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So shuttered venue operators. So Carlos, I was gonna let you jump in here, my friend, and kind of take the lead on this one for us. And I'm happy to move the slides along for you, Carlos.
Sure. Give me 1 second. I wanted to thank you very much, by the way, Chris. It's and everybody on the team there. It's a pleasure joining you all today. So we're getting a lot of updates on this program, Shuttered Venues Operators Grant, and it's important to note that this is a grant program, which is not typical of what SBA financial programs are. They're usually guarantees and loan programs, and I highlight that because the reason kind of the rollout is taking a bit is because of the nature of the program. There's a couple of things that we could highlight here. The main thing I wanted to highlight, let me pull up my notes here, because of the fact that it's a grant program. You're going to want to ensure that your application is complete because it can't be resubmitted. And that's because it's a grant program. So when the portal opens up, by the way, the portal will open up. The date has been released for that on April 8th. So we did just receive that date. So that's great. Now everybody can do some planning. And there will be an information session as with any other grant program. So a lot of the questions that we've received is, hey, when are we going to get this information or information about, ABC? All of that information is going to be provided at the information session, and it's a publicly open information session. I had the date here. I'm going to have to look for it in a second, and I can come back to you on that, Chris. But I'll look for it here. So I wanted to point out that once you apply, you cannot go back in and resubmit, and that's the reason for the importance of ensuring that you have all of the appropriate documents in and you're not missing anything, and so they don't have to come back to you and ask you for anything else, because you can't put in another application. Additionally, as opposed to some of the loan programs, there's no appeals to if the loan is denied. And just for context about how it's going to work, there's a portal that's going to open up, and then there's fields that people are going to be asked to enter information. So from what we're being told, it's pretty seamless process. So we'll see how it looks when it actually opens up. There was one more thing. To the point of ensuring that the application is complete before it's submitted, just for all of your participants, the best thing you can do is go and work with your SBDC or your VBOC or Women's Business Center or SCORE chapter. Another important thing to note, and this is a way different than it normally would be with a financial program. SBA employees are not allowed to help with any part of the application process, and that's because it's a grant program. So if folks are thinking, hey, let me just go directly to the district office, unfortunately, we're going to have to tell them exactly what I just said. That's the guidance that we've been given by HQ. That's due to the fact that it is a grant program. We're not allowed to provide that assistance. Technical assistance providers such as yourself will be able to provide that assistance. So that's why we're recommending that folks reach out as soon as possible to providers such as yourself. So this is a good slide here. This is some of the information. There's a couple of tranches of folks that are going to be priorities. There's a 90% first, a 70% second, and a 25% third. It's important to note, though, that the people that fall into those latter categories do not have to wait to put their application. Everybody can put them in at the same time, and as part of the processing, that's when they're going to decipher which ones are at the 90% and the 70% revenue loss, and then the 25% revenue loss. That's the third tranche. There's actually a fourth one for supplemental funding, but that one is of course subject to availability of funds. And that's, I mean, everything else we have here, there is a $2 billion set aside for these employees, businesses with 50 full-time employees. And they're at the beginning, there was questions and Chris mentioned this about some changes that had happened. Originally, there was information put out that you could not receive a shuttered venues grant if you receive a PPP, and that has changed. So you can still receive a PPP second draw, and you can have received a first draw. There's a little bit of differences in processing there. If you received a second draw PPP, that amount will be used to reduce the shuttered venues grant. So anything after December 27th, anything prior to December 27th, which is the first draw period, that amount would not affect in any way the application for the SVOG. So that's an important distinction. But I did want to highlight that you can get both of these at the same time now. So folks who are interested in applying for both, they now can. You can switch to the next slide to see what you got there, Chris.
Sure, let's see here. There you go.
Okay, these are some other specifics here. This is good information. The grant amount is 45% of gross revenue, and had to be in operation by January 1st, 2019. If in operation by January 1st, and they did have to be in operation by February 29th, 2020. We've actually got a lot of inquiries about this because folks that opened up maybe something afterwards, and unfortunately they do not qualify. Additionally, I will say there's a lot of things in the legislation for this grant program that are not SBA protocol. So things like if it's not a let me just read you a couple of them here because there's a lot. Facility requirements. Do they have a defined performance and audience space? Mixed equipment? Is there fixed seating? Are the employees paid or unpaid? So if they're unpaid, they wouldn't qualify. There's a lot of things that are disqualifying elements. So it's really important for folks to watch the information session. This information, that the key points that I just mentioned here, a little bit of these qualifiers. We have a document. It would take me an hour to read through this thing with the requirements, ownership restrictions, prohibited activities, things like that. But what I can do is send that to Chris, and he can give that out to you guys afterwards, and you can take a look at it because a lot of those things are pretty well enumerated in there. Folks are reaching out to the Office of Disaster Assistance and other offices to say, well, what about this thing, type of business? Would they qualify or not? They can certainly bring those things to us, but we don't have decision-making authority on those things. The last thing I'll say is before I get to that, there are qualifying expenses just like the EIDL program and the PPP. So those are all enumerated here in these documents I mentioned as well. And the information session date, last thing I will say is it has already been released. We just got that information, I think yesterday. That's the reason I don't know it. But I'm gonna look for it right now, and then I'll come back to you, Chris, and we can put that out.
Okay, perfect. Hey, thank you for that update, Carlos. Really appreciate it, man. And I can pick up from here for us in regards to the continuation of eligible entities include live venue operators or promoters, theatrical producers, live performing arts, organization operators, relevant, museum operators, zoos and aquariums, motion picture theaters, talent representatives, and each business entity owned by an eligible entity that also meets the eligibility requirements. So that was our Deputy District Director, Carlos Gutierrez from SBA. If you need SBA disaster customer service there's that information here. There's an email address as well. There's the email address for the reconsideration. And then on the servicing side, that if you're at that point where you're starting to make payments, repayment payments, then you have that contact information, both email and phone there as well. And that's it. You know, here's where you can contact us at 833-ASK-SBDC. You can visit our website and go to ASKSBDC.com to get other recordings for other material that we may have covered prior to today. And got loans at ASKSBDC.com. So that you can get some questions answered there. And we also have it for those that are Spanish speaking at Espanol at AskSBDC.com. And I'll leave it there. And then Alex, I'll turn it back over to you and Nicole to give a local update.
Thank you, Chris.
I'll stop. You want me to stop sharing, Alex?
I think it's fine to keep that up there. I'm going to hand it over to Nicole. Nicole's going to give an update on what it means for our business community here in Santa Clara County to move into the orange tier, which just happened yesterday. So Nicole, if you'd like to give your update, now's the time. And for those folks that are watching and listening, please, again, ask questions. We have experts in front of you today. Let's make this a good conversation. But for now, let's hand it over to Nicole.
Thank you, Alex. My name is Nicole Inamine. I am from the City of Milpitas Office of Economic Development. I'm an economic development specialist on Alex's team. So I'll just keep this update pretty brief. So as you all know, yesterday, Santa Clara County entered the orange tier under the state's blueprint for a safer economy. And that was largely due to our county, our COVID-19 transmission rates, our hospitalizations and deaths continuing to trend downward, which is great news. But I would also still like to echo our health officer, Dr. Cody's sentiment that we're not entirely in the clear yet, and it is important to try to reopen as safely as we can. So to continue to wear masks, social distance, stay outdoors, and get vaccinated when it's your turn to help protecting our community. But that being said, moving into the orange tier is really great news for our business community. It allows for a lot more activities to open up. So I'll go through those now, starting with indoor dining. Santa Clara County can now allow indoor dining up to 50% capacity or 200 people, whichever is less. Bars where no meals are served are limited to operating outdoors only. Wineries, breweries, distilleries where no meals are served are limited to 25% indoor or 100 people, whichever is fewer. Gyms, 25% capacity. General retail, grocery stores, personal care services, and hotels are all now allowed to open, but with modifications. Movies are at 50% or 200 people, indoor capacity, whichever is fewer. Places of worship are limited to 50%. And I would also like to make a quick note on employee break rooms. So indoor employee break rooms, the restriction on that is now lifted. However, Dr. Cody would like to point out that indoor break rooms are still a central location of COVID transmission. So she does still advise against opening those up. So that's an overview of what business activities are allowed. If you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A. I will also leave our business assistance email contact in the chat. So feel free to reach out to our office anytime if you're located in Milpitas. And if you want to read up on more details of what each business category is allowed to operate at, I will also leave a link down to our blueprint, our state's blueprint to a safer economy link in the chat. So look out for those, and I'll hand it back to Alex.
Thank you, Nicole. Great update. And so, yes, now again, for those folks that are watching and listening, we have Chris, Carlos, and Nicole ready to answer any of your questions. So please ask away. We'll take a moment.
Can I jump in real quick and add something that I wanted to point out?
Please, Carlos. Yes.
An important distinction of this SVOG as well is that potential applicants need to apply for a DUNS number, they need to register in SAMS. So that's a little bit different. That's usually a requirement of contracting programs. So it's not typical of an SBA program that's not contracting, but in this case, they do need to register in SAMS and then get a DUNS number, and then they can check on that with usually through DNB, Dun & Bradstreet. Also, we've had some notices from potential applicants that after they do that, they get contacted by private sector folks, trying to charge them for some type of activity or to help with the application or to help get them contracts, because usually that's for contracting. It's important to point out none of those are required by SBA. There's no fees, and they're not associated with SBA if they're trying to charge for those activities. That's all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Carlos. All right. So I'm not seeing any questions. Are you, Alex, Bree?
I do not. Guess since we have Carlos here, I'd ask a question about, well, Carlos, thank you first and foremost for sharing all that great wealth of information. Aside from what you've discussed, what other types of technical assistance does SBA offer, just generally?
Well, a lot of things are changing right now. I can tell you that now we're doing video tutorials that are available on our website. I mean, in past days, we didn't really have a lot of video tutorials. I think that's really ramping up. A lot of the webinars that we're starting to do are being recorded, and some of those, after vetting, those are being put up on our website. So I think those are great resources that folks can readily access just by going to the SBA.gov website. And as I mentioned, before they may not have, found certain information available. And I will say the third one is we're really doing a whole lot of FAQs that are getting updated very regularly, sometimes daily, at least weekly, on all three of these programs, but not just these other programs that are conventional programs like the 7A and 504 as it applies to debt relief. Obviously, right now, there's a huge focus on shuttered venues and the PPP program. There's been a lot of changes to the EIDL as well, additional funding that's gone in there, and there's a lot of unique questions. So in a lot of ways, and folks can pose questions there if they have questions that would eventually even be added to those FAQs. So it really serves to the benefit of everybody. So those three things: recorded webinars, video tutorials, and really, really good FAQs that are updated frequently.
Sounds great. Thanks, Carlos.
Sure.
Chris, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
We have seen in the last year that many small businesses have received financial assistance, but there seems to be a social inequity in terms of which businesses receive dollars. And that social inequity is based on minority businesses, women-owned businesses, perhaps even veteran-owned businesses. How can the minority-owned businesses, for example, put themselves in a position to be better qualified or be ready and poised for receiving financial assistance over other businesses?
Well, I think it isn't. I think when you're looking at grant funding is set up with criteria targeting specific, entities or ethnicities or groups or business types or segments of communities and things like that. But when you're looking at, federal and state funding, that's a protected class type of a thing, right? And then if you are in a specific rural area or underserved area, it's really about the education piece that folks need. Because what my experience has been with EIDL and PPP, and even with the California Relief Grant, is that how folks may be operating and running their business, how the business is structured, what kind of internal processes and procedures they're using you're not able to then, go and apply for because you don't have yourself set up accordingly or appropriately. And so like with PPP, a lot of folks that are sole proprietors, may not necessarily, they may be a sole proprietor that's an LLC. This is a common one. Sole proprietor that's registered as an LLC, and they're taking out distributions. Well, distributions don't count as W-2 wages. And so when you're trying to apply for the PPP and we're looking for wages, your distributions don't count. And so you're now not able to be able to qualify. So it's really being able to have someone take an internal pulse of the individual, the entity, and how you're going to line up for meeting the criteria for an EIDL, how you're going to meet the criteria to qualify for a PPP application. So I think when you're talking about the certain segments that you've mentioned, Alex, it's really getting them connected with folks like the SBDC, these SBA resources and partners, so that we can make certain that if you're going to pursue these federal funds, that you have someone that's helping to make certain that you have yourself set up in the appropriate way to be doing it. Because that's what I've seen ever since last year, last April when we started doing this here. It's just, not being able to identify operating expenses and, not being able to do payroll, and you're paying people under the table, or you're having people work as a 1099. And so you don't have any employees. So you remember when the PPP first came out, you couldn't use 1099s. You couldn't count them in your calculations. And then 1099s weren't included. With the evolving programs, Alex, it's just making certain that you have a trusted resource, like, an SBDC advisor, your Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development departments. You can call your actual SBA district office, to get some help as well. But I really think it's just really helping folks to make certain that they're set up appropriately to be able to apply and qualify for this funding.
Thank you, Chris. It's really important. You know our community really well, and the Milpitas community is a very diverse community, and our business community reflects that. So I think it's just important information, obviously, to share. Good. Anybody from the audience?
I had one other thing as well there, Alex. I'd mentioned earlier that there was going to be this very important information session, and I have the date, and I'm going to post it here in the chat as well. So it's going to be on March 30th from 11:30 to 1, and there's an Eventbrite sign up. And anybody that's interested in that program, it's very important to be on that call, especially if they're in a unique situation. I'm not sure yet, but there may be a Q&A session that goes along with that. And like I said, I'm going to put that in the chat here so everybody has it, and I just did. So I encourage everybody to sign up for that. It's coming up very soon, next Tuesday. So it's right up on us.
Yes, great. Thanks, Carlos. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, March 30th is next week, and then April 1st is on Thursday. We're moving on to April so quickly. Yeah, so we have folks that are listening and watching. We have a representative from Assemblymember Alex Lee's office. Anurag, thank you for joining us. Wonder if you have any thoughts you'd like to share. Don't want to put you on the spot, but in case you want to share any information, please do. Okay. I see that Thomas is with us, with Chappelle. Thomas, thank you for joining us. If you have any thoughts or any questions, please ask. Okay, hearing none. Chris, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, at this point, Alex, I mean, we can give folks back some time in their day. There's no questions. That means folks received whatever they came to the webinar to get. That there's nothing left on the table right now. But feel free. Like I said, there's the SBDC, there's the Milpitas Chamber of Commerce. There's the Economic Development Department at City Hall. So you have places to reach out to if you have questions. Thank you, Brey, for all your help, always behind the scenes and making things happen. Nicole, thank you, and Jeanette for working together. And then Alex, let's continue putting these on. Let's reassess and see what the pulse is of the city as we move into the month of April, and go ahead and get things moving forward there. So thank you, everybody, for joining and being here, okay?
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good rest of the day. Stay safe, everyone.
Absolutely.